The movie begins with an old ranger in the middle of a forest. Strangely, he sticks a paper and covers what's written on a placard, which says, "I owe this land a body." One night, Lennon, a new county ranger, drives her car to patrol around. While driving, she stops for a deer that appears in front of her. The radio experiences static, so she adjusts it. When she looks back to the road, she is surprised to find the deer vanished like a bubble. The next morning, she overhears her fellow rangers talking about her, not realizing she's sitting nearby. Another ranger named Jackson arrives, approaches Lennon, and congratulates her on landing her dream job. While Officer Zhang discusses, Lennon stares blankly at the missing poster of the old ranger. During their briefing, their areas and modules are assigned to become guides. Afterwards, Lennon starts to put her things in the car as she has been assigned to a different location. Mr. and Mrs. Finley approach her, congratulate her, and express their joy as she slowly fulfills her dreams. Later that day, a helicopter takes her and Jackson to their assigned camp, the former area of the old ranger who went missing. After examining her camp and office, she organizes her belongings and prepares for the night. Before going to sleep, she marks her map and takes a look at an old picture of herself with her parents. As she lies in bed, she notices several names carved into the wood. The next morning, their dispatcher calls roll and Lennon responds to mark attendance. Before leaving, she attaches a note asking not to disturb her camp as she will be gone for 3 days. Afterwards, Lennon proceeds to travel on foot. While walking, she listens to her phone using earphones to podcasts and news about people mysteriously disappearing. Along the way, the dispatcher radios Lennon to give instructions. However, her walkie-talkie experiences static, making it difficult for Lennon to understand the dispatcher's message. Lennon quickly checks the battery, attempts to replace it, but realizes she has no spare. Ignoring this fact, she continues her journey. As night falls, Lennon relies on her flashlight as her only guide in the dark surroundings. Lennon is surprised when the walkie-talkie produces static sounds, coinciding with the appearance of the deer she saw a few days ago. When she checks the walkie-talkie battery, her forehead wrinkles upon realizing the batteries are gone. Shortly after, Jackson appears and comes across her. He says he will give her spare batteries. Before setting up tents, Jackson invites Lennon to have dinner with him. Afterward, they chat about their work. Lennon learns that Jackson has been working as a ranger for 10 years. Jackson asks if she sleeps well, and Lennon assures him that she does. The next morning, Lennon decides to head out first. She bids farewell to Jackson, who fulfills his promise and gives her spare batteries. Upon returning to camp, Lennon removes the note attached to the placard and quickly opens her box with a key. She then goes outside to take a bath. Days pass, and Lennon becomes accustomed to being a ranger. In the morning, she goes on patrol, and at night, she marks the map in her camp. This routine becomes her daily life, walking through the forest while reminiscing about memories with her sister and family. Everything was normal until one night, Lennon noticed a shadow of a person outside her camp. Due to the strange noise, Lennon woke up. To her surprise, there was knocking on her front door, and a person was shouting and asking for help. The man repeatedly banged on the door, and Lennon approached, contemplating whether she should open it. Considering the possibility that the man genuinely needed help, she opened the door. Upon opening, the man grabbed her and urgently told her that they needed to leave. He held her hand tightly while crying. Suddenly, he ran off, and Lennon chased after him. While running, Lennon immediately called their dispatcher for backup. The man disappeared from her sight, but when she heard his screams, she headed towards the source. After a short search, Lennon was surprised to see the man standing there, visibly frightened. The backup and rescue chopper arrived promptly. The next day, Zhang informed them that a girl named Sarah was missing. Zhang gave them instructions on how to conduct the operation and designated Jackson as the leader of the search. Before leaving, Zhang asked Lennon if she could still stay due to her foot injury. Lennon responded that she could still stay and help with the search. Lennon attempted to join the search, but Jackson stopped her and asked her to stay. Stubbornly, Lennon watched them leave, checked Sarah's ID, and returned to the camp to gather the necessary supplies for the search. As usual, memories of her mother searching for her sister flooded Lennon's mind, coinciding with her calling out Sarah's name. Lennon seems to have PTSD, so when she recalls it, she trembles and drinks the water she brought. The night fell, and Lennon continued her search. While walking, she saw the deer she always encountered. Every time Lennon looked away, the deer disappeared upon her next glance. After a few walks around the area, Lennon spotted a woman with her back turned, blood between her legs. Lennon approached the woman, identifying herself as a ranger. As she got closer, she realized it was Sarah, but she was acting strangely. Sarah stretched her hand forward, stared blankly, and uttered unintelligible words. Approaching Lennon, she questioned if she was real. Confirming Lennon's reality, Sarah embraced her. The backup rangers arrived, and Zhang approached Lennon, thanking her. However, Zhang disapproved of Lennon not following Jackson's orders. Jackson attempted to cover up for Lennon, but Zhang insisted it was between the two of them. Zhang expressed her dissatisfaction, acknowledging Lennon's good intentions. She then instructed Lennon to stay in her camp until the end of the season and the arrival of the helicopter. Jackson, concerned for Lennon, was disappointed, and she apologized to him, but he expressed anger and walked out. Inside her camp, Lennon stared at the map. Lennon was stubborn, so despite Zhang's prohibition to leave the camp, she still went out and continued to roam around. While lying in her tent, her walkie-talkie suddenly produced static. After taking a pee outside, she noticed movement in the grass. She followed it and observed it running like an animal. She tried to find it but couldn't. However, she felt it was close, so she entered the tent and grabbed her gun. From inside the tent, she saw its shadow, and after a while, it left. All of a sudden, Jackson radioed her, though his words were somewhat unclear due to static. He informed her about an injured man in her area and told her to help him. Lennon searched until morning, but in the process, she got lost. She radioed Jackson to report it, but his responses were strangely weird. The man on the radio spoke to her as if he wasn't Jackson, so Lennon sensed something was wrong and started looking for her way back to her camp. While walking, she was startled to hear a woman scream from the walkie-talkie, causing her to stumble. She remembered her sister Jenny's voice, telling her to wake up. After Jenny said this, Lennon regained consciousness and went to the stream. Later, Lennon returned to her walkie-talkie where Jackson continued to speak weirdly. Little did she know there was a creepy human creature behind her descending from a tree. She didn't notice it because she was still engaged in conversation with Jackson. As the creature descended, it hid behind the tree. Lennon looked back and noticed blood on the tree. She approached and examined it. It turns out the creature that came down from the tree was Sarah. However, this time her appearance was different. Lennon stepped back, covering her eyes, saying it's not real. While covering her eyes, Jenny whispered to her and Sarah suddenly disappeared. She left her walkie-talkie and continued walking. While walking, she sees the Finley couple camping. She tried to approach them, but they didn't notice her. She shouted at them, but they continued with what they were doing. She went to a tree and looked up. Afterward, she saw a ranger walking. She called out to it, but it continued walking towards the couple. When it faced her, Lennon saw that it was the ranger herself. Creepily enough, it demonstrated how to maintain the gun, and its voice became demon-like. It suddenly faced Mrs. Finley and shot the gun. Upon seeing this, Lennon ran away in fear. She looked up again and remembered memories of Jenny running. Shortly after, multiple missing posts appeared attached to the trees. One of those missing posts belonged to Jenny. While walking, she heard what sounded like someone eating. When she looked, she saw Mr. Finley eating the entrails of his wife while she stared blankly. Lennon vomited at the sight and sat in shock upon seeing the couple back to normal. Lennon approached Mrs. Finley and aimed the gun at her, but she couldn't bring herself to shoot and let it go. Again, she saw memories from the past where her mother asked her where Jenny was. After a while, she found the walkie-talkie again, and the man told her to kill for him. If she doesn't, he will keep her. Lennon said she won't do it and told him to keep her instead. She returned to the creek, and on the sand, she saw a map indicating her location and how to return to the ranger station. She proceeded to follow the map to find the ranger station. While going towards the station, she saw a camp. She approached it and saw a shoe inside a plastic bag labeled as evidence. In her memories, the shoes belonged to Jenny, and her mother cried when the ranger handed them over. When Lennon turned to the ranger, its face appeared distorted. She took the shoes and entered the camp. Inside, she saw a familiar house. Inside, her younger self and Jenny were eating while their mother prepared food for them. All of a sudden, Jenny ran out, so Lennon followed her. On a radio, she heard two rangers talking. The female ranger said she saw Jenny and explained that Jenny wasn't lost but taken, and there was nothing they could do. After hearing the conversation, Lennon noticed that the door behind her was opening and closing. She entered and found her mother peeling her own hands. When she exited the door, she found herself on a funeral. Approaching a coffin, she saw a dead deer with its insides exposed. Behind a door, Jenny peeked out as if saying something to her. She entered and went down a long hallway. At the end of it was a door, and as she approached it, the lights inside suddenly turned on. When she tried to turn back, the long hallway turned into a wall. Upon entering, she saw her father shaving. The man said it was just a nightmare, so he returned to his room to sleep. The man went to the bathtub, and suddenly he took out a sharp knife. Lennon was shocked when he suddenly stabbed himself, so she left the room. She was taken to a new room where the lamps on the side began to flicker. She saw someone standing in front of her, and the lights went out. When she opened her flashlight, the figure was still in front of her. She freaked out, ran, and saw Jenny, who entered a room, so she followed her. Jenny's room was flooded, and she was standing in the middle, looking. Lennon took the opportunity and asked for forgiveness, but Jenny said it wasn't her fault. Jenny then said, "They keep us here," and when Lennon heard someone screaming outside, she tried to ask Jenny who they were, but Jenny suddenly disappeared like Batman. When she left the room, the old ranger suddenly appeared in front of her, screamed, and everything went pitch black. Moments later, she saw a distant light, tried to block the blinding light, and suddenly, Zhang appeared, holding her hand. Lennon asked if she was real, and Zhang answered yes. Lennon explained that since she hit her head, she couldn't understand what was happening. Zhang clarified that it wasn't due to hitting her head, but because creatures caused it. Despite Lennon's confusion, Zhang mentioned that they take, and as rangers, their only option is to give in. When Lennon asked who they are, Zhang admitted not knowing much, only that these creatures live there and take those who are lost. Zhang also revealed that they let some go, hoping those individuals would share their experiences and protect the creature's space. She admitted to giving many to these creatures, including Jenny, Lennon's sister, expressing regret for it. Zhang, feeling protective of Lennon, declared that she wouldn't let the creatures take Lennon. However, Lennon insisted it was too late and she would give them what they wanted. Zhang then made a sacrifice, choosing to give herself instead of Lennon. Zhang bids farewell, multiple hands grabbed Lennon, and she was pushed below the lake. Lennon swam until she managed to resurface. Upon emerging, she saw someone who she initially thought was Jenny, so she swam towards her. Fortunately, it turned out to be Jackson, who quickly assisted her and contacted the dispatcher. While lying down, Jenny asked Jackson why they didn't immediately inform Lennon about the truth. Unable to answer her, Jackson responded by contacting the dispatcher. After that day, Lennon continued her role as a ranger, wandering during the night. Jackson got promoted and replaced Zhang in her position. While in a briefing, Lennon stared blankly at Zhang's missing post on their bulletin board during the briefing. As usual, Lennon got assigned to her former camp, and she carves her name into the wood like the others. Everything returned to how it was, with the only difference being that Lennon now understood the strange occurrences behind the missing posts. One day, a man named James went missing. Lennon joined the search operation and found him staring blankly on top of the mountain, uttering gibberish. When James asked if she was real, Lennon hesitated and admitted that she wasn't real. She left James, avoiding the potential demise she might experience again, and the movie concluded.